April 5th, 2014. 10 years ago, today, at the time I recorded this anyway, this was the day I beat Bioshock Infinite. And now, 10 years later, I've decided to play through the game once more, so I can give you my decade-long retrospective. But I warn you, this video is seriously just gonna be complaining about the game. If you want to watch a good, well-structured review of the game that actually explains things and the story coherently, instead of just raging about the game like I'm about to do, I'd recommend watching Boulder Punch's video, The Wasted Potential of Bioshock Infinite, a video title which I seriously agree with. I would obviously also recommend watching the Bioshock Infinite We Never Got video from Crobycat if you somehow haven't seen that. Actually, if you somehow don't know anything about Bioshock Infinite's story or what happens in it, this video is going to be full of spoilers, so you should really consider if you want it ruined for you. I'm mainly going to pick apart the plot, not so much the story, which I feel isn't that spectacular either. But the general gameplay is mildly satisfying, and it's about 6 hours long. Plus you get to hang out with Elizabeth for half of that time. I paid $7 for this game less than a year after it came out. That's like a 75% discount off the release price. So that alone should tell you a lot about how this game sold. Games that are selling well and are good don't usually get put up for a fourth of their price less than a year after release. I've played through this game 3 times now in total, and I've only unlocked 40% of the achievements, including, strange bedfellows? What is that? So if you are a deranged achievement completionist freak, you might get a lot of playtime out of this game. In general, I'd say if you're going in blind and you aren't paying full price, ideally you wouldn't be paying anything for it, then the game is worth a quick playthrough, especially since the game is kind of historically relevant in gaming history. And after you beat it, you can come back and get angry with me in this video. If you know even a little bit about the story, it kind of ruins the game, but the gameplay on its own is fun sometimes, but it's not that great overall. That's my mini review. Now for my technical complaints. I remember when I first played through this game 10 years ago, I really was enjoying it at first. I was super into the setting, and it has some satisfying combat. The general writing, especially the dialogue, is pretty good.
Gonna throw it? Or are you taking your coffee black these days?
But there's a point in the game where the story starts to break down, and judging by my playtime, it means that I instantly replayed the game after beating it the first time, probably out of shock or confusion, thinking, there's no way that's the whole game. Surely, I must have missed something, but no, I didn't miss anything. And this time, it's no different. Well, actually it is, because when I first tried to launch the game this time, 10 years later, now all of a sudden the game wants to install some launcher for a game that is already downloaded. Amazing!
Can I just play the fucking game? Holy shit!
About halfway into this launcher trying to update itself, I decided to look it up, and it turns out that this thing isn't required to run the game at all. It's seriously just a piece of malware that collects data. This is the absolute state of modern gaming. Even games that came out over 10 years ago are being infected with this stupid crap. I don't think you have to deal with this shit on consoles. PC gamers, what's going on, fellas? How are you okay with this happening? If this were just 20 years ago, 2K Games would have to hire 24/7 armed security. And even after removing the stupid launcher, I kept accidentally launching Bioshock via Steam, which would attempt to open the launcher, and when it couldn't find it, Steam would then re-download about 100 megabytes just to get it back. So I found a way to fix this if you have auto hotkey. Just make a script like this, which will launch the game when it's ran, compile it to an executable, and then put it in the launcher folder and rename it so it's the name of the launcher executable. So now when you press play on Steam, Bioshock actually launches instead of just trying to run the completely unnecessary games launcher, which was added in 2022 for no reason other than to mentally fuck with you and your computer. But I guess that isn't all the technical problems this game has. The FOV is disgusting by default. It's like max 80 degrees, even for a console game that's like really low. You can fix this by editing a config file. It's the config in your documents folder, not the game files itself. Very confusing. Go check out this page on the PC Gaming Wiki that shows you how to fix half the shit wrong with this game. Also, the mouse sensitivity. Oh my god, the mouse sensitivity is so bad. Even after editing a config file, it's still either way sensitive or it isn't sensitive enough. And even once you get it dialed in almost perfectly honestly, it still somehow feels simultaneously sluggish and too sensitive at the same time. And to make it worse, when you sprint in this game, the mouse sensitivity decreases temporarily. And the game's controls are so annoying. Sprint, crouch, and aim down sights are all toggle only, crouch being the most annoying because it's bound to C and control. Sure, I could change my bindings, but I didn't, and because of that, every time I went to melee someone with the V key, I would usually be fat fingering C as well, putting me in this stupid toggled crouch where I can hardly move while I'm in the middle of what should be fast action combat. Oh, and the reloading animations. Oh my god. I had so many situations where I went to melee after my gun was halfway reloaded, causing me to do another full reload animation after my melee attack. It is so easy to cancel reload animations. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter how far into that animation you are, if you cancel it at any point in time, the gun is not reloaded. The one unique combat system in this game, the sky rails, are also extremely clunky. Sometimes they work flawlessly, but in some areas, you're gonna be pressing space to grapple, and the game is just gonna make you jump up in the air. Again, probably in the middle of combat. The other controls for keyboard and mouse are also just kinda bad in general. I should have really rebound things, but I played through it with everything default because I couldn't be asked to waste time configuring the game any more than I already did. Okay, before I go further into this, I gotta give some love to the artists. The game looks great, the theming is wonderful, and I don't think there are any other games that have this early 1900s World's Fair White City style. I really want to make some levels based on this kind of style myself. I'm a professional environment artist / level designer, by the way. This kind of thing is extremely cool. I really think we need to get back to this in real life. Back to when our currency was backed by silver and had naked women and dudes riding chariots throwing lightning bolts on it. Huge, beautiful neoclassical buildings with marble and cities made of stone. Airships! Real Tartarian civilization shit. Anyway, the environment art, the models, the textures, the character design, the voice acting, animations, stuff like that, it's all incredibly well done. They did such a great job on it. Almost no area in the game is visually out of place. The sound design is good, but I did notice a few times where certain sounds were obviously standing out, as well as a few technical sound programming issues, like when a sound was obviously intended to be emitting from a specific position in space, but it was noticeably coming from somewhere else.
Okay, what about his temperament?
Oh, he was certainly an anarchist. You can spot them anywhere, you know.
The level design is lacking. When I say level design, I'm talking about layout only, not art. It feels almost insecure, as if the designers knew the levels were very linear and weren't confident in them, so they added in extra areas to temporarily distract the player or reward them for exploration, but these areas end up being so obvious and right in the middle of your linear path that you're directly led to them, thus defeating the concept of exploration entirely, with a few exceptions. And maybe that's intentional, because it certainly had to be in a few places, such as the bar where you play the guitar and Elizabeth sings. This bar is placed and well illuminated directly in front of the player's path, when the real path you need to take is off to the side here. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with linear level design, especially in a story-focused game, but these levels are just, for the most part, boring, really. Even the later game hub-style levels, where a more open level is reused multiple times, usually giving you a new battle every time you return to each sector of the level, these often feel artificial and occasionally pointless, sometimes only throwing a small handful of enemies at you. Sometimes you have to backtrack to advance the game and you don't even get a new battle, you just walk through an empty arena you previously cleared out. And then there's some hub levels, like Finkton, where it's the most boring possible level layout imaginable. I can see why some low spatial awareness players might occasionally have trouble navigating some of these levels, especially with their deliberate dead-end optional areas. Hilariously, the game just straight up has a button that just shows you where you need to go. I didn't even know about this at all till after I beat the game, and I looked up to see if Infinite had like an in-game map so I could get top-down overviews of each level, but there is no in-game map, just the tell me where to go button. I guess the developers thought the 2013 console gamer audience wasn't responsible enough to follow huge signs placed around the world showing you where to go, though these people were probably playing the game at like 75 FOV and would rather look at the arrow on the floor anyway. Okay, how about something kind of nice about the game? I think I had a lot of fun once or twice throughout the entire entire game, and that was doing combat where I was dumpstering nerds while I was jumping and flying all over the place using the skylines. Unfortunately, most battles, you end up running out or low on ammo if you're an aggressive epic gamer like myself who only uses the carbine and an explosive weapon, even with Elizabeth's infinite ammo supply. And she always somehow ends up giving you items at the most inconvenient possible times, or sometimes she just bugs out and cancels her aid completely. And I played through the game on normal difficulty, the setting the game designers probably intended the game to be played on. And the whole time I had to spam F on every single object I passed by just so I would have enough ammo. Like, maybe I was playing it wrong. Maybe I was supposed to swap out weapons with whatever's on the ground in each new area, but I stuck with the same 2 guns for most of the game. Maybe that was my problem. Maybe my weapon choice made it so I ran out of ammo quicker. Using the carbine makes it feel like I'm always having to reload. If you could have all of the weapons like in real Bioshock, then the ammo situation wouldn't be a problem at all, and it would let you use different weapons situationally. Judging by how ammo is placed around the world and how weapon upgrades work, I suspect the 2-weapon limit was added in near the end of development for some reason. The game seems built as if the player has access to all weapon types. Your character can even carry all ammo types simultaneously, and the engine certainly supports all weapons at once, as the DLC, which I didn't and will not play, shows. The weapon upgrades cost so much that it highly incentivizes you to stick with just the guns that you upgrade, not picking up whatever random gun comes your way. And I don't think you find enough money in the game for you to upgrade every single weapon, unless maybe you do some insane metagaming achievement hunter shit, but then you also take away from upgrading Vigors. They probably wanted to limit the players so it would force them to make a choice and play the game a certain way, thereby making replays slightly different if you decide to use other weapons or upgrade other Vigors. Oh, and buying ammo from the machines is also such an annoying task. You gotta scroll around and find the ammo type you want and spam click on it. Why isn't there just a fill all ammo button? There are multiple areas where if you run out of ammo, it's better to just let the enemies kill you so you can respawn with new ammo. You can't rely on your melee attacks either. They feel super weak. Again, I'm playing this on normal difficulty, and most enemies are taking like 5 to 6 normal melee attacks to take out. So what's the point? Even with my fully upgraded carbine, probably the best gun in the game, I still feel like half the enemies are bullet sponges. And I don't remember it being this bad 10 years ago, so maybe they changed something. Or maybe it's because this time I'm not taking my time to carefully aim at each enemy and use as little ammo as possible. But I suspect mine is the same experience that most people will have. Except, of course, the artificial difficulty nerds who want to play on 1999 mode, which is entirely focused around micromanaging your ammo and money, not exactly a skill challenge. You might as well just be playing a spreadsheet simulator, especially considering you normally only unlock 1999 mode after you beat the game once, so now you know exactly what to expect, thus defeating the purpose of a harder difficulty. And the game isn't difficult, it's just tedious and annoying. And what about plasmids, or Vigors, as they're called in this game for some reason? It's never really explained why there are Vigors in Infinite, or where they came from, except for a single voice recording that mentions Fink observing a biologist. Obviously a reference to the original Bioshock.
I know not which musician you borrow your notes from, but if he has half the genius of the biologist I now observe, well, then you are to be the Mozart of Columbia.
Other than that, they have absolutely no reason to exist besides being an excuse to give the player Bioshock plasmid abilities. In combat, Vigors are pretty good, but are more of a utility than a weapon unless you spend all your money upgrading them. Plus, you always get every Vigor in the same order every game. And most of the fun ones you don't even get till you're more than halfway through. Another messed up thing is that you are the only person in the whole game that uses Vigors besides like 4 enemies. The firemen, who use the Devil's Kiss Vigor to throw balls of fire at you, but they can use other powers that you can't. The Crow guys also have a completely different ability than your Crow Vigor, and allegedly these big robot guys are using the Shock Jockey Vigor, except again, it's a completely different ability entirely compared to what you have. The only character besides yourself that just uses a Vigor the same way you do is the mini-boss Slate, who you have to fight to get the Shock Jockey Vigor. It's so stupid stupid. They could have done way cooler stuff with the abilities, especially playing into the quantum mechanics story element, but nah, just copy and paste bootleg plasmids. It's a Bioshock game after all, right? Why even is this a Bioshock game? It has nothing to do with Bioshock as a setting or lore-wise. There is one seemingly forced expose of Rapture during the end sequence of Infinite, and there is that one voice recording I mentioned earlier, but besides that, the base game has no ties to Bioshock. And the game's creators know this too. Before Infinite even came out, Ken Levine did this interview with MTV where he said, "To me, there's two things that make a Bioshock game Bioshock. They take place in a world that is both fantastic and ridiculous. Something that you've never seen before, but it's also strangely grounded and believable. The other thing that makes it a Bioshock game, it's about having a huge tool set of power and a huge range of challenges, and you being able to drive how you solve those challenges. With Bioshock Infinite, we're really just expanding on that." This is 100% complete cope. Even 3 years before the game came out, he knew if he released this game with the Bioshock name and no tie-ins to the original, people would tear him apart. Bioshock was an established IP, a game that takes place in a fantastic world that's also grounded with a huge tool set and wide range of challenges. You just described pretty much every single game ever made. Is Halo Bioshock? Is Arma 3 Bioshock? Is Half-Life 2 Bioshock? Is Fallout New Vegas Bioshock? I'm just going down my Steam game list and they all fit this criteria. Is I Divine Cybermancy Bioshock? Yes, it's a lot closer to Bioshock than Infinite is, that's for sure. And the funnier thing is that in my 2006 Game Informer, which came out a year before the first Bioshock game, this same guy exclusively describes the game as being focused around player-driven choice, giving you different ways of doing things, something that Infinite is the exact opposite of. In Infinite, none of your choices matter at all. You get guns in the exact same order every time. You get vigors in the exact same order every time. You go through each level in the exact same way, fighting the exact same enemies, and not only that, but the few choices in the game you do get to make never matter. Pathetically so. Heads or tails? Doesn't matter, you don't even get to pick. Oh, you chose 2 of the 3 possible baseball throw choices? Wow, you get a single piece of gear, and it's the same for both. Bird or cage? Doesn't matter. And this one's the most disgusting. Even situations like this. Some guys are about to be executed or something, but you choose to save them by killing the bad guys around them. Guess what? Bioshock Infinite doesn't even give the NPC you saved a single scripted dialogue line saying thank you. Nothing. Completely pointless, and there are multiple situations like this throughout the game. At least 3 that I remember. Like, this is bullshit that there's nothing if you save them. No dialogue. He just cowers. Yeah, fuck you. That's so dumb. Pointless. You go down there, you save them. You couldn't be like, thank you. No, that's too much work. You couldn't, I'm sure they have fucking lines recorded for that already. No, they couldn't program that in though. That's too much. Fucking hacks. Now, after Infinite came out, Ken Levine did another interview, which this time describes his idea of what it means to be a Bioshock game in a much more complete way. And by this definition, yes, Bioshock Infinite would technically be a Bioshock game. Infinite also kind of has the Bioshock look. I can't really describe it, but all 3 games kind of have a look to them. Maybe it's the way materials are rendered, or maybe it's the roundness to the models. I don't know. They're probably all made by like the same art team too, so that probably plays into it. But yes, by some metric, you could call Infinite a Bioshock game, just one that doesn't take place in the Bioshock universe, even with the totally shoehorned in plasmids. Just like how Ken Levine's next game, Bioshock 4, Judas, is going to be. And this time, hopefully, it will be less buggy and less tedious than Infinite. He has had over 10 years to work on this one, after all. If you look at the history of Irrational Games, it's kinda clear what could have happened. Initially, they were working on Bioshock, and their studio got bought by 2K Games. games, probably because maybe they needed funding or maybe they needed help licensing the huge amount of music in Bioshock 1, you know, stuff like that. Well, doing so let Ken and his now renamed 2K Boston studio actually release the game. However, 2K then got the rights to Bioshock. Immediately after releasing Bioshock, Ken manages to get the green light to work on what would become Infinite, and in 2010, he also somehow, probably through some lawyer who's his cousin, got to rename his studio back to the name he gave it, Irrational Games. But then 2K started pressuring Ken to release something, so the studio hired a ton more people, which made it harder to manage. And on top of that, Ken would apparently go and change or completely remove weeks of work, all because he couldn't settle on something. Maybe it was choice paralysis or scope creep, but either way, it's a miracle the game even shipped. And it's also why the story and plot, while somewhat coherent, has major issues. I wouldn't be surprised if Ken himself wasn't satisfied with Infinite. Like, how do you go from working on Thief, SWAT 4, System Shock 2, and Bioshock, all some of the greatest games ever made, to the clunky interactive movie that is Bioshock Infinite? Many suspect Ken had bad blood with the publisher after Infinite was released, and that's one of the reasons for the DLC, which, as I said before, I haven't played, and I absolutely don't consider it Bioshock canon whatsoever. And I mean, everybody knows the only good thing to come out of that DLC is absolute baddie 1950s Elizabeth. The rest of that DLC is basically just a retcon of the entire Bioshock franchise. I've seen some people describe it as Ken breaking his toys out of spite, or destroying the Bioshock story in a way where 2K Games would never make a follow-up. And of course, oh, you wanted Bioshock in Bioshock Infinite? Here you go! After Infinite, his studio would not be working on another Bioshock game again. A game he created, which his own studio wasn't able to release under its own name, and now they can't even use the name Bioshock anymore. What a damn shame. I don't know how Ken has gotten 10 years of funding to just scratch his nuts and work on Judas, though I have seen interviews where he says stupid shit like, "I don't even like shipping games, I just like the process of making them." Congratulations, Ken. You've successfully turned creative work into another pointless, fake office job. May I suggest the Godot game engine, since you never plan on actually shipping anything? I'm sure there's nothing your employees like more than working on something for weeks only to have it thrown away because you changed your mind about something again. I really hope Judas is a good game, but let me tell ya, if someone gave me 10 years of funding to run a 15+ employee game design studio where I get full creative control and final say, I'd ship multiple new and unique games in that 10 years and more than likely be able to pay back that initial investment with big interest. Anyway, back to complaining, I want to talk about some overarching story themes. First of all, the elephant in the room. The reason why this is the ultimate Reddit game. Lay Multiverse! You mean there's a universe where girls like me? It's dumb. But there certainly was an attempt at trying to put things together, like the possible non-coincidence that the numbers on the stupid card and the clock in the lighthouse are the same number of coin flips that the Lutesses have done so far, signifying that this is the 123rd Booker iteration they've ran through. The Lutesses are great characters, by the way. In fact, most of the characters in the game are pretty good in general, but these two are especially good. And I can totally get behind the whole Doctor Who Time Lord thing they got going on, and their motivations are made pretty clear if you are willing to find the audio logs. But without those, these characters exist exclusively as plot devices.
Hello.
But also, why would the card and the clock read 122 if Booker is the 123rd attempt? And that clock looks a lot closer to 120 to me. And if they took the time to implement those tiny details, why wouldn't they make this Columbia schedule card line up with the correct time of day that the city would be in Maine? Well, it's because they didn't actually care about those details. In an IGN interview a few months before the game came out, Ken Levine talks about how stuff like the Columbia schedule is up to the player's interpretation, which means they didn't actually account for stuff like that story-wise, at least not in the story we got. It's just random clutter to make the level look cool.
We got a lot of people who are confused by that.
I like this Columbia flight path here too. I mean, was this kind of teasing where Columbia used to go? Is that sort of the idea here?
No, it's up to, it's whatever people think it is. That's one of the fun things. You sort of put it up there, and hearing people's views on what things mean and what they are is always interesting to do. And I'm sure that, you know, there is a authorial intent here, but that's, we'd rather sort of have people figure that out for themselves.
You can nitpick this opening sequence so much. In that same interview, Ken talks about how they wanted to make it clear to the player that the people Booker's working for really mean business. And they have this scary little note on the door, and they killed the apparent lighthouse keeper in a fucked up way. But if you've beat the game, you know that Booker seems to have been exclusively working for the Lutesses the whole time without knowing. And they don't exactly seem like gruesome murderers. Also, the rocket pod you get into would destroy the inside of the lighthouse, so it's not like this was a place used for getting to Columbia more than once. Really, it's just a lighthouse because they wanted to start the game the same way Bioshock started, to hammer home that yep, guys, it's a Bioshock game, trust us! Before you blast off, the pod randomly decides to flip you upside down so your gun can fall out for some unexplained reason, and so the player can see the rocket thrusters! Why even give him the gun in the first place just to take it away, and then the first fight you get into, you immediately get it back? So you blast off in the rocket. It's dark and stormy, possibly night considering the entire sky is darkened at the lighthouse, but the moment you pass those clouds, the sun is high in the sky. Must have been a pretty thick storm, but you also see the green grass through the clouds once you get up there. I guess you could explain this away by saying you pass through a tear when the screen flashes white, but come on, bro. Obviously, this works great as a contrasting level transition from a design perspective, but it's dubious from a continuity standpoint. Okay, so you enter Columbia and you get to walk around for a little bit. Right before the first big area, Booker sees a gigantic sign specifically letting him know people would be looking for him in particular. Why didn't he try to hide the branding on his hand? Because the next sequence wouldn't have happened if he did. Which brings me to the next big topic.
Lay racist white people!
And the raffle sequence. Nobody has been able to intelligently analyze this scene. The general idiot take on this one is that
the evil white Christian people who built this beautiful city are executing this poor interracial couple just because they wanted to get married.
But that isn't what's going on at all. And the only reason why people think this, I think, is because the game's subtitles give the characters' names bride and groom, because in this sequence, they have obviously been dressed up as a comedic bride and groom. But if you use in-game dialogue clues, you can tell there's a little bit more to the story. First of all, this form of public execution wouldn't exactly be completely out of place in 1912. They were still doing public hangings back then. And these people are using baseballs. These two might not even die from this. Just like how people today still cry and complain about all the people of the bike that were hanged back in the day, they never want to stop and ask, why were they hanged? You can watch the character named Groom saying, "It was all me, please let her go, I'm the one you want." For some reason, nobody who talks about this ever wants to ask what it is that he's referring to. Obviously, that it cannot be them wanting to get married, as most dumbasses think, because you can't take sole responsibility for that action, which is also very likely not a crime in Colombia, as is later shown in the game. So the reality is, these two, who may be a couple, or maybe just the guy, seems to have committed some kind of crime worthy of being baseballed. And we know that these two are associated with the criminal and terrorist organization, the Vox Populi, as when you encounter these characters later, the one now named Black Bride says,
"Daisy always said somebody like you would come along."
And what did Booker come along and do? He just started murdering random police officers. Though this could be argued that it was in self-defense. It's also pretty clear via other context clues that Colombia likely does not actually have laws against people of a certain race or religion. Everything people always say about how bigoted and hateful Colombia is just jumping to conclusions without analysis. You see people of all races living in Colombia. Normal, bike, Oriental, banker, and even the filthy Irish. Women hold positions of power. Elizabeth is being groomed into becoming the next leader of the city. There's statues honoring Lutece for her work. And even different religions are allowed. There's this vandalized J hat store thing, which was obviously vandalized by the locals of Shantytown, who are exclusively Irish and bike people. You can look into the extended Bioshock Infinite lore and find John Goldman, the legal representative for the Vox, when they had a violent strike 10 years prior to this game taking place, who also apparently sold the Vox out, so maybe they don't take kindly to people of the bank. Then later in the main game, there's also Chen Lin and his wife's Buddhist shrine that you're forced to walk past, Chen Lin being a major figure, and the only reason he was killed was for supporting the terrorist Vox Populi. In the first alternate universe the game goes to, Chen Lin is seen as having a white woman as a wife. So obviously interracial couples are in fact allowed in Colombia, despite the fact that in 1912, in real life, this would have been illegal in most places of the United States. But still, the average take on this game is,
Oh my god, late racism, so bad!
which I guess isn't helped when shortly after the raffle you have to walk through the Order of the Raven, which is a caricature of a certain secret society that likes to dress up and do the lamest, most LARPy rituals to this day, mixed in with another comedic trope of a group of people that literally consist exclusively of FBI agents. And in this Raven Order and the police stations in the game, they have a big "Protecting Our Race" sign on the wall. What race exactly? German American? I'm pretty sure that everyone knows by now in current year that white people, black people is a made-up cattle branding concept used by the people who really run the world, the Dutch, to control you. Remember back when the game came out, every single person who criticized it was labeled a racist? You know why? Well, this game came out about 1 year before the situation which exposed everyone in the gaming industry was all colluding with each other to promote certain games and agendas, which those people are still mad about today. I think someone knew when the game came out there would be tons of valid criticism since the game was so different than what they had initially shown, and the entire story and plot are kinda weak. So they got someone to make up this concept that it's
Only white supremacists
who hate Bioshock Infinite. Seriously, these articles still exist. Some were seeded months before the game even came out. It's all completely manufactured division, done by the usual suspects. But secretly, Bioshock Infinite is actually based
on what?
and no one who has played it would think it's les anti-YT people. It shows how a stable, clean, ordered society filled with beauty is toppled by foreign criminals. Read into the extended lore. Daisy Fitzroy, among other people, were brought to Colombia as a convict worker for menial labor. She ended up working for Lady Comstock, and she admired her, but they framed her death on Fitzroy, captured her, and the doctor that helped her escape that captivity, she killed him for no reason after he gave her all his money. Huh. Gee.
I can't believe it.
She is literally a foreign criminal agent provocateur trying to destroy Colombia. But she kinda cute though. Shantytown is filled with bars and thugs. You legit get mugged.
Privileged types. Spare some coin, friend. Not all of us are gainfully employed.
You don't see drinking and crime in the rest of Colombia, do you? You don't see the owners of the delicatessen out protesting. Bioshock Infinite shows how these people are not workers going on strike, even violently, which happened quite a lot at the end of the 19th century in real life. No, the Vox are shown to be a terrorist organization who attack random civilians. By the end of the game, the once beautiful city is in flames, normal people are being murdered for no reason. There's even people getting on refugee ships, fleeing their homes, going back to the surface. It's absolutely insane. Bioshock Infinite is a lot closer to a commentary on the Bolshevik revolutions in Russia than anything else. Groups of poor, easily manipulated, low-class people being convinced by what are essentially foreign agents and criminals to take down their oppressors so these parasites can take power over those who they manipulated and the wealth of the nation. The Vox do not actually want to better themselves or society, they just want to be tyrants, and when they get that power, they are shown to destroy everything. So Infinite is absolutely based
on what?
There's nothing I love more in this game than hearing a disgusting Irish voice coming from a group of Vox enemies and mowing them down with the quickness. Pretty much no other game shows how the supposed good guys who are fighting the power are actually the very bad guys. Like, look at what they wear. They're dressed up in like 80s serial killer movie costumes. They are evil. So I think I've made it pretty clear that the supposed
right-wing extremist,
thank God the term alt-right didn't exist yet, of 2013, who allegedly thought this game was for SJWs or feminazis, as was the typical discourse of the time, were almost absolutely full of shit, or far more likely, plants put in place to muddy the water around the discussion of this game, probably to steer conversation away from the actual story and plot-related weaknesses, which I will now finally talk about. So what exactly is the plot of Infinite? plot being the things that actually happen in the game, not the overarching story. Well, remember, we came to the city to get the girl. So you walk through the city, walk into the monument where she lives, and you escape with her, but uh-oh! The plot device summons Songbird, who attacks for some reason and causes you both to miraculously plunge into an artificial beach, I guess? Even though Songbird's job is allegedly to protect Elizabeth, he sure likes to put her in situations where she's likely going to just die. You wake up on the beach, and instead of dancing with a perfect cutie, Booker decides to lie to Elizabeth and tell her that this random airship in the background is going to Paris, which short-circuits her girl mind. So now your mission is to get to that airship, and guess what? That airship is your goal till the end of the game. Seriously, everything you do between now and the last hour of the game is trying to get to this airship. Booker goes to buy tickets for this airship, but uh-oh, it's a trap!
Get the girl! Get off of me!
After killing everyone, you go try and get to where the airship lives, but the plot device that controls the gondola thing you gotta ride to get to it just randomly decides to stop working. And apparently, it can only be controlled by a plasmid that, for whatever reason, no one has ever seen before this point in the game. Luckily, there's signs everywhere and even Elizabeth telling you where to find it in another part of the map. So you go there and you have to battle a mini-boss who, for whatever reason, is the only guy who has a bottle of this stuff, even though he already has the powers himself, so I guess that means he was carrying an extra bottle of Shock Jockey just for you. By the way, this Slate guy, knows Booker, they were in a battle together. That's the developer's way of letting the player know how much of a badass Marine Booker is. Once you get the Shock Jockey Vigor, you can finally activate the device used to summon the gondola. And you're probably thinking, wow, that's an interesting mechanic. You know, being able to power these devices with the Vigor. Surely they must have made use of this throughout the rest of the game, and nope! There are 4 total unpowered Shock Jockey things in the entire game, and they're all in this one level. They never use it again. Completely forgotten. Amazing! Shout out to the one guy who designed this level. I'm sure he thought it was cool, and this is probably one of the better, more open levels there is. There is actually some exploration you can do. So anyway, finally we get to the airship, and we hop on board and everything's great till Elizabeth notices Booker has set the coordinates to New York and not Paris. And even though Booker is shown to be totally okay with lying earlier in the game, instead of just being like, this airship isn't gonna make it across the ocean, we gotta go to New York first. Or, I live in New York, I gotta go there first, I can't come with you to Paris. Sorry. He decides to tell her the truth, that he needs to deliver her to New York to pay off his gambling debt. Booker is allegedly Native American, which makes that, way funnier. Coyotes say, drink fire water and play blackjack. Then, for some unexplained reason, instead of talking to Booker, she melee attacks him with the wrench from Bioshock. Whoa, epic Easter egg, guys. Totally not just convenient asset reuse. A single swing with a wrench from a girl who can't even pick up a medicine ball is enough to totally knock Booker out for a serious amount of time. But Booker can also absorb bullets and has a shield, so what's going on here? Oh, it's because she didn't use a wrench. She used the plot device!
Hello.
So this magic Bioshock wrench knocks Booker on his ass, and while he's out cold, Elizabeth for some reason sends the airship back to Columbia instead of Paris, when suddenly it gets hijacked by Daisy Fitzroy and the Vox. I guess they needed someone else to steal it before they stole it themselves. Oh, and somehow Elizabeth magically escapes the airship before the Vox guys board it. She's just shown walking out the door of the flying airship. When Booker finally wakes up, he gets to talk with Fitzroy, who has now stolen Booker's stolen airship. Huh. I've never heard of such a thing happening.
I can't believe it.
But don't worry, she'll give it back to you if you can get a Chinese guy to get guns for the Vox. They then push you out of the airship, and Booker just shrugs it off like it's nothing. I thought a small girl could knock him out, but don't discuss this or that means you hate bike people. So guess what? The entire game has now pretty much reset, and we're back to doing some kind of task in order to reacquire the same fucking airship. Great! After fighting through a single arena, Elizabeth magically appears when she just so happens to get kicked off of a little random airship being called a stowaway. Again, it's never explained how she got on that ship while they were being surrounded by the Vox earlier, but whatever. She runs away, so before you're reunited with her, you have to fight in another big arena, and then a handyman throws you off into the sky, but Elizabeth saves you using a tear. They actually did a good job here, showing Elizabeth taking a little airship over to the next area where she meets up with you. If you didn't notice that, you would have just thought she magically teleported there, like she will do later in the game. So you get into this unskippable elevator cutscene, which is a cartoonish expose of how industry worked in the late 19th century, with company stores and basically slave labor conditions, but it kind of brushes all that aside. And remember, by 1912, there were already tons of actual battles where people like the Pinkertons, who Booker was a member of, killed tons of people that were striking. But in real life, throughout all the violent clashes and thousands of workers killed in US history striking, not once did any of them, destroy the place that other people lived, like the Vox do later in the game. Anyway, you make your way to the gunsmith, who is going to provide you guns to arm the Vox, so you can get your airship back, but he's not home. His wife says he was taken away to the Good Time Club, so off you go there. This isn't some epic journey or anything, it's literally the building next door. So you do a bunch of battles, which are kind of boring, the concept of which is that Fink, the guy who owns all of the industry in Columbia, is basically offering you a job. And he also somehow knows about your agreement with Daisy Fitzroy to provide them guns, which is a very interesting plot hole because that just happened a few minutes ago, so how does he know about that? Booker and Elizabeth go down into the basement of the Good Time Club where there are jail cells for some weird reason, only to find the Chinese gunsmith guy who was gonna get you weapons has been killed during interrogation, since apparently they knew he was working for the terrorist Vox Populi group before Booker even contacted him. Oh no. However, will we get the airship back now? Gee, if only we just got a job offer from a guy who can provide us literally any service. But nah. And then the Lutessas show up. So they convince Elizabeth to magically transport us into a completely different universe where Chen-Lin is not dead in this particular room. Amazing. Being in a whole different universe, that obviously means our deal with Fitzroy still must be good, right? Right? So you make your way out of the jail, and then you encounter two semi-ghost guards that you killed in the previous universe. And these guys are completely leaned out. Apparently they remember being dead in the other universe, somehow.
Remembered what?
Being dead.
This will be important later on. Now you just gotta fight your way back to the Chinese guy next door. Chen-Lin is now, in fact, alive, but oh no, his tools are gone, and he's having ghost hallucinations as if his tools are still there. Because remember, he was dead in the previous universe. Booker and Elizabeth come to the extremely logical conclusion that if only they can get his tools back, that means he will be totally fine and be able to make the guns they need to fulfill the deal they made in a different universe that they can't go back to. I shouldn't have to explain why this is fucking idiotic. His tools have been taken to the police station in Shantytown, which again, the entrance to is literally the building next door. This area with the gunsmith is a tiny hub world that you have to keep coming back to a couple times. On to Shantytown, really nothing happens here. It's all just filled with lazy Irish criminals and drunks, but I was able to make the most of it.
I'm fucking drunk. Fucking scrumpy. Hey, that's a fucking scrumpy. Fucking Jesus, you fucking cunt. He's a fucking cunt.
There's another decent arena segment, and then you enter the police station where Chen-Lin's tools are being kept. And man, that was a really invigorating 10 total minutes spent in that second universe. I hope you enjoyed it, because Booker and Elizabeth realize, gee, how are we gonna carry all those tools back with us? Hey, I know. Let's go into a completely different universe where the tools are not in this room, and that must mean that they're back in this shop, right? Okay, cool, great. Let's get out of here. Hey, good thing the lock Elizabeth picked in the previous universe is still unlocked in this one. The game then once again reminds you that the people you killed in the previous universe somehow remember that and are in some kind of fucked up half ghost mode. Alright, cool. So, exiting the police station, the Vox are now fighting with police. Basically, an armed uprising is taking place, and when walking back to Finkton, you discover something very interesting about yourself.
You're Booker DeWitt, the hero of the Vox!
What the hell are they talking about?
Yeah, so it turns out in this particular universe, Booker has led the Vox uprising and apparently died, and he even now somehow remembers doing so. And then you can go and find voice recordings left by Booker himself.
us the girl and wipe away the debt. As plans go, I'd seen worse, except this girl was already gone. Monument Island's a damn ghost town. It seems like they evacuated her when they heard I was here. An old friend told me Comstock spirited her off to that fortress of his. As a one-man job, this just went from betting on the river to drawing dead.
By the way, guys, I'm a gambler, in case you didn't remember. That's the whole point of the story, is that I'm a fucking degen. He states that Elizabeth wasn't there when he went to find her in the monument, so I want you to remember, in this particular universe, Booker never rescued Elizabeth, which means Songbird never attacked, destroying part of the monument. And that means Booker never stole the airship, which means he never made a deal with Fitzroy. But the goal right now is still, get the airship. And if Booker died in this universe, why isn't he also half ghosted up like all the other dudes that have died? Nah, he just got a nosebleed.
OMG, noseblood!
So you walk back to Finkton again, do another meh battle again, only to find Chinese man and his wife all dead. Probably killed by the very Vox that they helped arm. And you know what the objective changes to? Go to the factory, the building across the street, and reclaim the airship, which again, you never took to begin with. So you are on your way to the factory, and you're in kind of a boring battle when suddenly a huge airship appears, and your job is to destroy it. And even though Elizabeth manages to get up on this airship with you, and you could easily escape on this one, which is much bigger than the one half the game's plot revolves around, you have to, for some reason, destroy it. And when you do so, the game rewards you with a fun objective indicator that says, go to the factory and reclaim the other airship. Holy shit, bro, you can't be serious. Okay, so you walk into the factory, and in the unskippable elevator cutscene, you get a phone call from Fitzroy. Of course, Booker reminds her of the deal he made with her 2 completely different universes ago, which she just brushes off. Basically, she just gave you a friendly courtesy call to remind you that the Vox are now your enemy from this point forward in the game. Cool, thank you. I can finally blast away these disgusting Irish. By the way, the objective is still reclaim the airship, in case you forgot. So you walk into this area, and you see Fitzroy murder Fink in cold blood, followed by a pretty decent combat segment. This one's really fun, especially if you know the wiggle trick to unlock your camera when you're on the skyline. During this whole battle, you can see that, wow, the airship, the one we want, is somehow sitting right there. Finally, after all this bullshit, we're so close to reclaiming the thing we stole 2 universes ago, which just so happens to be conveniently located in this area to advance the plot. Whatever. After the battle, Fitzroy is about to murder Fink's son, but Elizabeth squeezes her small, probably max 90-pound body through a little hole and kills Daisy Fitzroy, thus saving the kid. Make sure you press F to comfort Elizabeth. And congratulations! Finally, you're reunited with the airship you traversed multiple universes and killed countless people to get, when you could have, like, I don't know, used literally any of the other zillion airships in Columbia. So Booker takes off in the airship, dialing in the coordinates for the middle of the ocean near Svalbard for some reason. Elizabeth comes out in her cool new outfit and has cut her hair, thus physically removing the trauma from her justified kill. When suddenly, the plot device activates, causing Songbird to come and once again attack for no apparent reason, even though it's been made very clear since the beginning of the game that his whole reason for existing is protecting Elizabeth like he's a Bioshock Big Daddy, and even Elizabeth has said he's her only friend. But he still attacks and nearly kills both of them. Then he's once again just gone, like last time. Amazing! So you crawl out from the wreckage, brother, to be greeted by the Lutesses, who claim that you can control Songbird, and he will take you where you need to go. But in order to control Songbird, you apparently need to go to Comstock's house to find out how he controls him? Okay, at least we aren't going after an airship, right? Right? Leaving this area, we get a bit of environmental storytelling. People are loading up on this flying ship thing, likely as refugees fleeing the war-torn Columbia for the surface. Hey, why can't we get on that airship with them? After a little Vox skirmish, you enter a building and immediately find a board filled with scalps, one of which is Fink's. Remember when Daisy killed Fink like 15-20 minutes ago? So I guess within that time they were able to scalp him and bring the still blood-soaked scalp over to this random area and add it to the board. There are more Vox skirmishes after this point, all of which feel extremely tedious or boring. These all lead up to a room with a combination locked door. Have you ever played any video game? I'm sure you can guess what the code is. Tee-hee! Really, the code is just there to force trigger a cutscene where Elizabeth holds my hand.
And now, a word from the plot device.
Hello.
Oh no, there was a plot device in the room with us the whole time! And of course, Songbird attacks, but this time we just hide behind a desk and he decides to leave us alone for some reason. At no point did either of them ask, gee, why do these plot devices keep getting set off at the most inconvenient possible time? Like, the plot device was in the airship when they first got it in the first universe, so why didn't it go off then, but it did the second time they got the airship? It's because the plot is cobbled together from bits and pieces of a once cool project. So you put in the funny Easter egg code number, and then you get to wrap your hand around Elizabeth's tiny neck. The next part is a big arena that you would think would be pretty fun, but the battle with the Vox here was just kind of boring this time for me. I remember this area being a lot more fun the first time I played. And the rest of the areas are equally boring too, though now you have the best plasmid, Return to Sender, so you can absolutely dunk on these nerds. So here we are at Comstock House Gate. The computer that controls the gate recognizes Elizabeth as her mother, but it needs fingerprint two-factor authentication. Very modern. So Elizabeth comes up with an amazing idea. We're gonna go take her mom's hand off her corpse, which just so happens to be located and preserved Lenin style at the graveyard nearby. Are you serious? That's the reason why we have to fight the ghost? Is because we need her hand. We need her fingerprints. Is that why? Are you serious? That's why? Should be a simple grave robbing job, right? But uh-oh, Comstock has rigged the mausoleum with a machine which can suck out Elizabeth's quantum juice, and then somehow that juice goes into the dead body, turning it into a spooky ghost mummy. And mommy. This first battle lasted like 30 seconds for me. I feel like when I played through this 10 years ago, I had a much larger and more drawn out situation here, but I don't know. The Lutesses, of course, show up and explain that you must now uncover 3 truths in order to tame Elizabeth's ghost mom, I guess? Which is code for, you have to backtrack through the entire level, refighting the Vox in each area and opening up a few tears to reveal the game's story. Once you're all the way back at the cool-looking arena in the beginning of the entire level, you enter the bank and fight a ton more Vox nerds, before you open up the final story-progressing tear. And then you have an actually decent fight with the ghost mom. After this, you now once again have to walk all the way back through the level to get to Comstock House Gate, and have the final battle with the ghost mom, which then lets her and Elizabeth finally make up. The ghost mom then blasts open the door for you. Congratulations! Time to go to Comstock's house. Hey, this gondola thing leading up to the house, couldn't we have, like, I don't know, just flown one of the flying ships around the gate and skipped that entire chunk of the gate? Oh no! It's Songbird! He's come to advance the plot by chucking Booker up into the top of a building before attempting to kill him up there for some reason. Luckily, Elizabeth teleports up to the top of the building to save you just in the nick of time by apologizing to the bird. The two then fly off, and the objective of the game is now save Elizabeth. Cool, just walk across the bridge and suddenly, it's snowing in July? Whoa, what does that mean? Well, after walking past the beautiful architecture, you realize there's been a time skip, and Elizabeth is now the leader of Columbia. This whole next part is an extremely simple, optional stealth section, which seems to possibly lead into another tear, where you meet with Elizabeth, who is now old. She's still kind of bad, though.
Guess what? You are a G-MILF.
Anyway, she's destroying New York for some reason, based, and then she hands you a note and sends you back in time so you can save Elizabeth from having, like, all her quantum juice sucked out or something. The battle here was super annoying because I was out of ammo the entire time. But you eventually save her and you pull the plug out of her back like it's that thing from the Matrix. And now your new mission is kill Comstock. And where exactly is he at? He's in an airship, of course! It's back to airship finding simulator! It's not that bad this time, though, because you decide to get the genius idea to just, like, ride one of those small airship things to get to the bigger airship. And this is a cool sequence. You're, like, grappling onto incoming smaller ships that are attacking you. And once you make it up to Comstock's airship, it's, like, separated into multiple levels. Each level is another arena. And these ones are all pretty decent. There's tons of ammo and supplies everywhere. everywhere, and you have so much mobility using the sky rails. You eventually make it to Comstock, and in a fit of rage, Booker kills the guy, but not before he asks about Elizabeth's pinky. So the goal now is to destroy the siphon so Elizabeth can use her full power to find out what happened to her pinky. You know, the siphon, the huge machine inside of Monument Island. Immediately after this, the Vox attacks in huge numbers, thus proving we're still in that third universe, by the way. Elizabeth destroys one of the plot devices, which now gives you the power to control Songbird, and that lets you attack some of the Vox's ships. After a pretty long, drawn-out battle, you get to Monument Island. Which, hey, remember, Elizabeth wasn't in when Booker went to get her in this universe. So why is it still half destroyed as if Songbird attacked it before? And wouldn't Songbird attacking it have damaged the siphon to begin with? Don't ask continuity questions, just press F to end the game. Yep, that's right, the moment you press F here, the game is over. The rest is just a 15-minute cutscene, which ends with you realizing that you were Comstock the whole time. So Elizabeth drowns you, thus destroying Comstock for good, but it also somehow keeps Booker alive because in the post-credits scene, which if you skip the credits you will never see, Booker is in his office with his daughter, Anna, aka Elizabeth, and that's it. That's the whole entire plot, fully detailed. Let me give you a really quick recap. Go to city, rescue Elizabeth, go get airship, lose airship, then go get it again, but the bird crashes it. Try to find a way to control the bird, but the bird takes Elizabeth. Go rescue Elizabeth, go to Comstock's airship and kill him, then blow up the tower. That's the entire plot. I don't care how much you want to analyze the ending and the story and
Blame Multiverse.
the core journey. The plot in this game is so stupid and pointless, and the time travel, multiverse, story, and lore do nothing to help this weak-ass game. Let me just compare this real quick to another game, Half-Life 2. Arrive in City 17. Travel to Kleiner's lab. Travel to Eli's lab. Eli gets captured, so you travel to the prison to get him out. Teleport back to the city, which is now at war. Break into the big tower and blow it up. Surprisingly similar, but one of these games is a timeless masterpiece that will be enjoyed indefinitely into the future, and one is Bioshock Infinite. Absolutely not a fair comparison by any means, except that if you know what you're doing, both games will take about 5-ish hours to complete. Actually, you can beat Half-Life 2 way faster, obviously. The Half-Life 2 current speedrun record is like 29 minutes, and the Bioshock world record speedrun is almost 90. The fastest speedrun metric will say a lot about a game, but much like the developers of Bioshock Infinite, I'll let you, the viewer, come to your own conclusions as to what that means. You know why, 10 years later, people are still mad and talking about this game? It isn't because of the fake political bullshit, it isn't because of
Blame Multiverse,
and it isn't because the game is good. No, it's because the game could have been one of the best games ever made. But what we got was Airship Finding Simulator. It might as well be called Bioshock Wasted Potential or Bioshock Airship. Ken Levine has worked on some of the best games of all time. Infinite could have been a part of that list. And hey, if you're a dumb multiverse nerd, maybe you can cope and lie to yourself that maybe there's another universe that exists where Ken Levine had more time to flesh out a coherent story and plot within the world of Infinite and actually made one of the best games ever. But in the real world, we sadly didn't get that. What a shame. Bioshock 1 was a perfect example of bringing System Shock 2 style gameplay over to consoles in a clean and accessible form. Bioshock 2 built upon the first game narratively and fleshed out the Bioshock setting as its own thing, usually being considered the best of the two games. And then you have Infinite, a game unrelated to the first two in any way, with similar but worse gameplay mechanics and a semi-coherent but bad story and a horrid plot. The journey you go on in Infinite is boring and tedious. The multiverse science shit feels like it was just bolted onto the game in the last minute, as does most of the story in general. It doesn't just feel that way, that is the truth, because it's no secret that the game's development was stifled because Ken Levine couldn't commit to anything, and he had a hard time managing people. The studio had to hire Rod Ferguson to come in just a few months before the game would release to actually pick up all the bits and pieces to turn it into at least some semblance of a releasable game. Really, this entire video might just be a criticism of Rod's attempts at salvaging the parts of the game he had to work with, and if that's the case, he probably did the absolute best job he could in the time that he had. When Infinite released, it got widespread praise from gaming media. You wanna know why? Because as was shown just a year later, all gaming journalists and major game companies were essentially scratching each other's back, or more likely sucking each other off in some form. Bioshock Infinite was shit on launch, and it's even worse now somehow, and no amount of shilling or literal political movement psychological operations will ever change that. And that is an infinitely sad truth. Whoa, this game, fucking game of the year.
If the prophet had just railed against the sun.
Game of the fucking year. She's kinda bad though. Damn, bitch.
You see a young girl, blue skirt? No?
But I'm without an escort if you're looking to pass the time.
Oh, really?
Hello, sir.
Oh, hello, sir. Shit, man.
Foolishness, you know.
Oh, you know,
monkey shines.
Monkey shines and shit.
Kind sir, would you happen to have the time?
Yeah, bitch, I might.
Elizabeth, isn't that a lovely name? That was odd.
She's an agent. I'll be killing her.
Closing, everyone.
Ooh, look at this area. Look at this.
It's locked.
Keep a lookout.
Why did this door just open? And it makes you wonder where they got all the red fabric from. This is lore, guys. Oh my god, look. Oh. The fact that it ends like that is so fucking dumb. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you get subscribed. I upload a new video every week, but it's usually not long-form, non-stop, angry video game reviews like this, though I do have one more angry video game review that I'm planning on making. Go watch some of my other videos. They're really good, trust me, bro. Better than the plot of Bioshock Infinite.